Louisville is a city known for many things: world-class bourbon, historic horse racing, one-of-a-kind restaurants. But underneath the veneer of Southern hospitality lies many dark and twisted stories. From the darkest depths of the Ohio to the highest peaks of the Knobs, from New Albany to Newburgh, from Portland to the Highlands, J-Town, Smoketown, Butchertown, and everywhere else under the shadows of the Twin Spires, these are Louisville True Crimes. Welcome to this week's episode of the Louisville True Crimes Podcast. I'm your host, Adam C. Thomas, and this week we're talking about a case I followed with more attention than any other case we'll discuss on this show. From the beginning of my research, I came across it and became more and more invested in this case and its outcome than any other. Something about the way it was handled and the media circus surrounding it that really caught my attention. Louisville in the summer of 1979 was much like the rest of the nation, planted unceremoniously in the middle of an unprecedented gas shortage. The National Guard had been deployed to Owensboro for a driver strike. On the 25th of June, then-Governor Julian Carroll ordered 160 guardsmen deactivated from the area. There were threats of violence from and against the gas truck drivers, and the Guard had been deployed to protect them. Over 300 remained in Owensboro, Somerset, and London, with Thomas Maxedon, executive director of the Kentucky Petroleum Council, asking people not to rush out to the stations to fill up so quickly, as this only made the problem worse. David Becker, however, was unconcerned with the gas shortages. He was finishing up his evening at the Rock Creek Riding Club, an equestrian club, in what's now the Clifton area of Louisville. Before he left, his mother asked him to stop at the J-Town Kroger to pick up peanut oil for the night's dinner. He headed that direction when he left the club around 6:45 p.m. After leaving the Kroger, David noticed a police officer had another car pulled over near the parking lot, but thought nothing of it. Becker returned home around 7:15. As he entered the home, he found his worst nightmare. His mother, his father, and his niece had been slain by an unknown assailant just moments before he got home. At 7:17, Becker called the police. When the police arrived, they found Howard's body in the family bathroom. Moving further through the house, they found Helen and Erica's bodies, his mother and niece, in one of the nearby bedrooms. A cursory search of the house turned up a small caliber target rifle, but the police couldn't verify that this was in fact the murder weapon. Becker was arrested and charged with the murder of all three victims, as well as the rape of his niece. He was held on a $100,000 bond. The police did presume a break-in was possible. However, the home did not show signs of forced entry, quickly ruling that possibility out. Typically, this creates an assumption that the victim knew their murderer. 4 days later, on June 29th, Becker was indicted in the case and allowed supervised leave to attend his family's funerals. Under indictment, Becker hired attorney Gilbert Nutt. Nutt was also the vice president of the Rock Creek Riding Club. He immediately set to work attempting to get Becker's sisters some form of relief and a lower bond they could achieve and get their brother, whom they believed innocent, free from jail. On appeal of the judge's original indictment, the judge, instead of decreasing the bond, increased it to $200,000. Nutt then made the case that he had 4 credible witnesses that could place Becker at the riding club that would strengthen Becker's alibi and exonerate him on every charge. Nutt's witnesses could credibly place Becker at the riding club as late as 6:48 p.m. Becker sat in jail for months, waiting patiently for his sister to pool enough money to pay his bail. In August of 1979, Becker's sisters took out an ad in the Courier-Journal. They would go on to offer a $5,000 reward for any information that would lead to David's exoneration. David's trial was scheduled for October 9th. During an investigation of the crime scene, it was determined that 2 different weapons were used in commission of the murder. One was a .22 caliber target rifle. Police had only recovered some of the weapons during the initial sweep of the house. The second, a .25 caliber handgun, was not discovered at the scene of the crime until the second day of investigations after Becker had already been arrested for the crimes. Becker's trial was moved once again, this time to February 19th. On December 11th, Becker's sisters had finally raised enough money through cash and placing their homes up as collateral to have David released on bond. David, his sisters, and the rest of the Becker family would all be together for the holidays. After the trial began in February, some of the 911 calls were played. Police officers working the case testified that during these calls, Becker seemed, quote, unconcerned during the discovery and preceding phone calls. Prosecutors during the call stated that this was one of the most extensive investigations in Jefferson County history. During the trial, it was shown that Howard Becker, David's father, had been shot in the head using the handgun and once in the chest with a target rifle. Helen Becker, David's mother, was shot once each in the neck and head with a target rifle. Then, something completely unexpected happened. On February 29th, right in the middle of the trial, a bomb threat was made against the Jefferson County Hall of Justice, where the trial was fully underway. Undeterred, Lawrence E. Higgins, who was the judge in the case, stated that this was a common occurrence, and allowed the jury to determine if they would like to adjourn for the day or to continue with the proceedings. The jury chose not to evacuate and to continue despite the bomb threat. One piece of evidence presented during the trial was testing done on Becker's hands and clothing for gunpowder residue. A trace amount of the chemical was found on Becker's pants. However, it was determined possible to encounter the same chemical through other normal, everyday means. This evidence was dismissed. Other material evidence found throughout the house included a towel from the bathroom where Howard's body was found. This towel was found to contain trace amounts of blood, semen, and pubic hair, of which the only viable samples being the hairs, which had been linked to both David and Howard. Investigators referred back to the previous police statement about Becker's seemingly uncaring attitude regarding the incident. David claimed that he had often pictured his father dead because he thought his father would die soon, as he had become rather unhealthy in his retired life. A key piece of evidence in the trial was a statement from Becker's neighbor, Pat Grant, that an unknown vehicle was seen speeding away from the Becker home. This vehicle was seen during the time it would have taken Becker to leave the riding club, stop at the Jeffersontown shopping center Kroger for the peanut oil his mother had requested, drive past the officer who had stopped another driver just outside the shopping center, and return home. The officer Becker passed, David H. Jones, testified in the trial that he had in fact stopped another driver in the area Becker claimed to have seen, lending more weight to his story in defense. Around 1:45 a.m., Becker gave Sergeant Howard the information about driving past the officer during the time in which he was accused of being at home during the murders. Becker's admission to Sergeant William Howard was brought into evidence. Howard claimed that Becker had admitted the killings to him at approximately 1:45 a.m., although Howard didn't believe him. He heavily implied Becker should take his time and rethink his series of events and his story. Becker went over his story again with the sergeant once more. He told the sergeant he had come home and his niece Erica wanted to play. Becker went upstairs and ignored his niece. He claimed to tell his niece, who had come back to his room and asked to play again, that he would play a game of "I'll show you mine if you show me yours," and proceeded to undo and drop his pants. Erica screamed and he assaulted the young girl. Helen, Becker's mother, came upstairs to see what the commotion was, and Becker ran to get the rifle his family kept in the kitchen. His father ran down the hallway to also see what happened, and Becker claimed to have shot him right there in the hallway. He then braced the rifle against his hip, shot and killed his mother and niece. He claims he did not remember shooting his niece, but that he must have. He then claims he turned off the stove where his mother had just started cooking dinner for the family and went into the living room where he found Erica's clothes. This confession and retelling of events conflicted with much of the evidence found in the home after the murders. The location of his father's body was in the bathroom, and not in the hallway where David claimed to have shot him. It was simply not possible, given where Howard Becker's body was found, for this retelling of events to be possible. The case moved on well into the following months. In March of 1980, pathologist John Pless was asked to provide his expert opinion on the case based on post-mortem evidence. Pless suggested that there were two killers in this case based on his findings. However, Judge Higgins told jurors to disregard this theory as Pless was unqualified to provide his opinion on the evidence he had been asked to examine. Witness testimonies began on the fifth day of the trial, shortly after Dr. Pless gave his testimony. Several members of the Rock Creek Riding Club, including the president Harold Morgeson, were asked to provide testimony. Morgeson testified that Becker was regularly void of emotion, stating Becker had the same demeanor whether he won a blue ribbon or came in last place. Another of Becker's neighbors, John Rosen, testified that he had never heard a crossword between the family even when they were building the house in which they lived on Broad Run Road. One major element of the evidence that helped Becker's case were the French fries his mother had started to bake moments before she was murdered. As Becker returned home, he smelled the fries burning and rushed to the kitchen to turn off the stove. This was a key piece of evidence due to the element of time. The time it took for Helen Becker to place the French fries in the oven to the time it took for them to burn to the point they were when Becker returned home was crucial to Becker's defense. This time would need to match up with Becker's reported time between leaving the club and arriving home in order to verify Becker's story. George Chapman, a representative from Antec Incorporated, was hired by the prosecution to test exactly how long it would take to burn the French fries to the point they were at the time Becker found his mother. On the same day that Mr. Chapman testified about the burnt French fries, defense presented another forensic scientist, Charles Morton, to provide evidence countering the prosecution's claim. As stated earlier, the amount of gunpowder residue found on David's pants was trivial enough to be dismissed as coming from any number of sources outside the home. The police had also claimed that several areas of the house were, quote, too rough to obtain fingerprints from, a claim Mr. Morton discredited as well. The last claim of the prosecution that Morton took to task were the claims of rape by Becker himself. Morton claimed that in order for Becker to have been the rapist, samples of blood, semen, or fecal matter would have needed to have been present on both victim and perpetrator. As you will recall, the only place the combined evidence was present in the Becker home was on the towel in the bathroom. After having been presented with this evidence, the jury convened for over 4 hours, at which point they decided to adjourn for the day and to reconvene the next morning at 9:30 a.m. The next morning saw the courtroom, now adrift in press, police, and curious onlookers, presented with multiple pieces of evidence. Another witness was questioned, Martha Fontaine, who was also a member of the writing club. Fontaine testified that Becker had interrupted her lesson as he was leaving the club at 6:40 p.m. to tell her writing instructor he had a call waiting at the main office. After each side had presented their case, evidence had been weighed, and the jury had everything it needed, they adjourned for the better part of 12 hours. Becker sat on pins and needles awaiting the verdict, his otherwise cool demeanor turning to agitation and anxiety. He knew that the decision would have major ramifications on his life moving forward. Toward the end of the day, the jury was still unable to reach a verdict. Becker was more aggravated than normal now, and claimed that having to go through everything that happened again would, quote, just be devastating. In the brisk, chilly morning air of March 3, 1980, the jury in the murder trial of David Becker had reconvened and had come to a verdict. At 11:30 a.m., the jury stated that David Becker had been found not guilty on all counts leveled against him, of murder and of rape against his niece Erica. The moment the verdict was read in court, Becker's attorney slapped him on the back and exclaimed, "Hot dog!" in the courtroom. The one factor the jury claimed led them to their decision was the element of time. They concluded that it simply was not possible for Becker to have left the writing club, stopped at the Kroger, come home in the time it took for the French fries to be placed in the oven and burned, and then called the police. Since the French fries were already burned when David arrived home, according to his testimony, the jury decided it simply was not possible that David murdered his parents and niece. Investigators in the case claimed that they had exhausted every possible lead in the case and made no further plans to pursue the case any further. This was despite the fact that Karen Higgins, Erica's mother, claimed to have a 3-page list of clues that would lead to the actual killers. Police refused to look at it when they were presented with it. Becker was a free man that afternoon and said that upon his release he would go and enjoy a strawberry sundae and return to the writing club to ride his American saddlebrake gelding, which he named Majestic. With his newfound freedom, he also applied to veterinary school at Auburn University. Thanks for listening to the show. The show is produced, written, and hosted by me, Adam C. Thomas. Story and script editing is provided by Steph Parks. The show is engineered and recorded with special thanks to Matthew Davis with Hipfire Media and is edited by Tim Miller from Apparatus Sound. Don't forget to follow us across the social media landscape. We're on Facebook as the Louisville True Crimes Podcast, on Instagram at LTCPod, and on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Louisville True Crimes. Or send us an email at louisvilletruecrimes@gmail.com. Or you can always visit my website at www.adamcthomas.com. Another way you can help us tremendously is by going to iTunes and leaving us a rating and review, which helps us more than anything. The goal of all growing podcasts is to get as much steam behind them as possible through good ratings and reviews to help them rise through the ranks quickly. It costs you nothing but a moment of your time, and it helps us out tremendously. So if you like the show, head over there and help us out that way. And as always, we'll see you next time with more Louisville True Crimes.